On this week's Movie High-Low, we're talking DeLoreans, Flux Capacitors, and 1.21 gigawatts. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious shit. This is Robert Zemeckis' Back to the Future. I just made us some delicious cocktails. My mother is a Diet Coke-aholic, always has been, and a friend of hers found this drink called the G's Louise, which oddly enough looks like a Diet Coke. And it was just funny because her name is Louise and she loves Diet Coke. So I tried to make it and I think it's pretty not bad. I'm not a big fan of Amaros personally. It's not my go-to necessarily, but I think I'm gaining an appreciation for them. So I made this delightful cocktail for us to try tonight.
And I am having a neat whiskey because we've been watching Mad Men. And
it with no ice.
It just made me want a neat whiskey, and they're very good.
It's meant for sipping.
It's meant for sipping.
I remember the days when I used to drink Canadian Club like that back in Malden.
Yeah.
I was smoking and drinking those.
We were bad. We were bad kids.
I was really bad. I was smoking a lot of cigarettes too.
Yeah.
I think it was Camel Lights at the time.
Yeah, I remember smoking cigarettes for on and off for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then I was done with it. But you didn't. You smoked for a little bit longer than I did.
Yeah.
But it's a bad habit.
I think it was a bit of a rebellious phase for me.
Yeah. We lived in kind of a shitty apartment, so it didn't matter if it smelled like smoke.
But for those of you who are interested,
Jesus.
I'm just cheersing with the mic stand.
That's all.
For those of you that are interested in the cocktail recipe, it is 1.5 ounces of Amaro Averna or a comparable Amaro, darker in color, richer in flavor, 0.5 ounce of Chinar Amaro, 3/4 ounces of fresh squeezed lime juice, 3/4 ounces of triple sec with a hard shake, strain over fresh ice, and top with soda water. I topped ours with tonic water because we had some extra tonic water to get rid of. So it adds just a tiny bit of sweetness and a little bit of quinine, which is good to ward off malaria and the mosquitoes that harbor malaria.
And apparently...
That's actually the reason that tonic water was originally drank.
Isn't coronavirus also quinine? Isn't that what they're saying? That?
Well, it's in tonic water, so there you go.
What's the difference between tonic water and soda water?
Soda water is just carbonated water.
And what's
seltzer water? Tonic water has quinine and sugar in it.
Oh.
I think there's 80 calories a can of the little tonic
Those
waters.
little cans?
Yep.
That's 80 calories in that little
sugar
can?
In it. It's honestly, it's kind of like Sprite without the lemon lime flavor. It's sugary soda basically, but it's also got quinine in it.
What's the point?
Because it mixes well with drinks, but the original purpose of it, as with bitters, were meant for medicinal purposes.
So there was certain
bartending
alcohol.
Fun facts with D.
There was certain. I know we should have.
I'm still waiting for New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc to come.
I know Big Sauvignon Blanc is going to be knocking down the Movie High-Low door
Blanc.
at some point for sure. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Movie High-Low, a podcast discussing the best and worst that cinema has to offer. I'm Dom.
This is D.
And this week we've hit a milestone, I would say, for this week. We are on episode 12. A dozen, a baker's dozen. Is a baker's dozen?
A baker's dozen 13.
Is that really?
Yes, a baker's dozen is 13.
Okay. Why does a baker's dozen have to be 13?
It must be like the bonus
They
one.
get
You
an
know what I
extra
mean?
one?
Dozen, yeah, an extra one because I like it.
All right.
I'm not sure exactly why it's the extra, but it's an extra. It's
All right.
It's 13. The baker's dozen is 13.
So just a layman's dozen is where we're at.
You know
right
what's
now.
funny though too? Speaking of that, I've been making some some delicious Mexican food this week that I've been trying to get adventurous with some of the different recipes I've been making because we're all quarantined and staying home, which means cooking most of the time. And I've made quesadillas and enchiladas, so I've got a few extra tortillas than I need. But the packages say 8 tortillas per pack, and guess what? Guess how many there are in each pack?
8?
9.
So
it's like a baker's 8. I don't know. I mean, they have an extra one. And then there's meatballs that I've gotten before, like the fast ones that are already pre-made just for a fast weeknight meal when you don't want to make it all from scratch. I think it's the Shady Brook Farms or whatever. The turkey meatballs, a lot of times it's supposed to be, I think 12 in there. Yeah, and they always have an extra one. And it's
so
weird.
It's
almost like here you go, here's a bonus one because we like you.
Or is it more that like they think that
they almost always have an extra one in there.
Maybe the packaging people screwed up, or they think that you're going to screw up and they're like, you need this extra.
I think it's more of a bonus one, like here you go because you're buying our product. It's like a bonus one.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like,
all right.
I don't know. I have to imagine that's sort of the rationale behind it.
I guess it makes sense. Well, we're on episode 12 and we have hit one of my all-time favorite movies, probably my favorite movie that we've reviewed so far as high movies go. And that is, this week we are doing Back to the Future, directed by Robert Zemeckis, released on July 3rd, 1985. As said, it's a high episode. Says who? IMDb right now.
July 1985?
July 3rd. So July, the day before.
2 months before I was born.
The day before 4th of July. That's right. 1985.
And a year and a month after you were born.
Yep. Year and a month after I was born. High episode, says who? 8.5 on IMDb. Puts it in the top 100 at number 38. It's got a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, nominated for 4 Oscars, won 1. Should have been nominated for way more and won way more, in my opinion. I think... so let me ask you a question. Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
The exact first time? I'm sure it was on TV with my family or something. See,
I remember. I literally remember the first time I ever saw this movie.
It's one of your favorite movies.
And this, I think this is probably the most influential movie of my lifetime. Is this film?
Right.
It may not be my all-time favorite.
Definitely in your top 10.
Well, it's definitely in my top 10. It may not be my most all-time favorite movie, and it may not even be the movie that... What was that?
My stomach, I think. I'd like you to make your actual, not top 10. I want you to make it your top 100 or whatever, your favorite movies.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's so many times we're watching things, you're like, oh, this is definitely a top 10. Oh, this is, and it's I wonder what really ranks there.
I know. It's hard.
So I can hold you to it and be like, oh yeah, and then I can look at it and be like, oh, actually you ranked this at this, you know what I mean?
Well, I feel like
that would take you a long time to probably devise your exact.
I feel like it's kind of constantly shifting and evolving and moving. I mean, there's certain ones that will kind of stay with me forever. This movie though, for me, I think it's the most... Because I saw it at the specific age that I was, this specific movie at a specific time, I think this is the thing that kind of really shaped me, or at least made me kind of discover my love of films and then eventually filmmaking. You know, there were other movies that I saw as I got older that made me think, oh, I can be a filmmaker. But this was the first movie that I think I remember feeling something and being like, oh, movies are the thing. This is a passion. This is something that I can be a nerd about. But
it was also, whenever you first discovered it was also years after. You were born in 84. I was born in 85. So it's we were too young when it first came out to really.
Yeah, no,
But at the same time, so whenever you discovered it, it
was home video. Yeah, it was. I didn't see it in a movie theater.
It wasn't like it had just come out, but at the same time, it still resonated with you. You still connected to it on a level that.
Well, the first time I remember seeing it, was in my grandparents' living room, and I can remember the dimensions. I can remember where the TV was, where the couch was. I very vividly remember the experience of seeing this movie for the first time, just because of how much of an impact it had on me, and continues to have on me. Even when I rewatch it, it's never gotten old. It's never gotten boring. It's never. I sort of look back at my life and can, especially rewatching, I can pinpoint the things that this movie, the ideas that this movie gave me, or certain influences that carried throughout the rest of my life. So it's one of those things that it's just a very powerful movie for me. I mean, it
certainly had probably just as much, if not more, of an influence on your exposure to Huey Lewis in the News as American Psycho.
Yeah, definitely more. Definitely more.
That's the power of love.
So for anyone who's never seen the movie, if you live under a rock and you've never been exposed to this movie, quick synopsis. Marty McFly is your typical skateboarding, guitar-playing 80s teenager whose life is turned upside down when he is accidentally sent back in time to 1955. Completely out of his depth and plutonium, Marty must track down his friend and time machine inventor Dr. Emmett Brown, who informs him that only a single bolt of lightning can generate a reaction strong enough to send him home. On top of that, Marty has also interfered with his parents' meeting and now endangered his very own existence. Will Marty be able to play matchmaker to his horny mom and hopeless pop while helping Doc Brown harness a lightning strike from the old clock tower into the Flux capacitor? Or is this Irish bug out of time for good?
The Irish bug?
So there's a lot of ground to cover. I think mostly going to be highs, obviously, because this is one of the greats. What's some of the first stuff you got written down?
Well, the first thing I have written down is from the opening scene where Marty's inside Doc's barn, his laboratory, if you will, and he's got the pictures of the portraits of Thomas Edison, Benjamin Franklin, and then the dish that says Einstein. And it's funny because it's his influences or his heroes, if you will, but also Thomas Edison was my father's hero growing up. I told you about that always Thomas Alva Edison. But I liked that element of it because, I knew who they were when I saw their portraits, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense that he, Benjamin Franklin, we talk about a Renaissance man. He was like the Leonardo da Vinci of his time. I mean, there was nothing he didn't do. He invented fucking musical instruments atop scientific exploration and politics and literature, philosophy. He was one of the founding fathers, mathematician. I mean, he did everything. Brilliant man, Benjamin Franklin. And then, of course, Einstein, as you know, who was actually a subpar student in school and then later became a genius because of his theory of relativity. That was the first high. I liked that.
It was just the beginning. I mean, I love that opening shot, too, with all the clocks.
I like that Marty hooks up his electric guitar to the amp and puts it into overdrive, which is how I felt when you were testing the audio and the feedback came blaring through these headphones, and I almost ripped them off my head. Actually, I did rip them off.
He's got like this little guitar, too. It's like this little mini guitar.
Yeah.
I love that opening shot with like the tracking shot that's just going through all the clocks.
Yeah.
And then you see all the
toaster
just
that makes
all the crazy. Yeah. The toaster has just like been like burning the toast, just like refrying it like over and over and over again. It's going to set a fire at some point. And then he's got like the mechanical arm that's supposed to be pouring out Einstein, his dog's food. And you just see it's like the dish that's just overflowing with,
slop.
It's
Poor
like
Einstein. I don't like that he has Einstein get in that car like he's a test monkey or something.
He's fine. He's going to be fine.
I still don't like that. You know what? That's my low. That's one of my lows right there. I didn't like that. I should have written that down. I didn't even think because there's so many things I love about the movie, but that's definitely a low for me. I don't like. He should have put himself in that car or anybody. Put your fucking beloved dog in there. Why? So if something happens, the dog got killed. No big deal. I don't like that.
Well, I think it's more about the fact that Doc has to be there to give us the exposition.
Then
for
why
the
can't
story.
you send Marty or anyone in there besides Einstein?
Because Doc has to be telling Marty what's happening so that we, the audience, can have the exposition so that we understand. There's a lot of technical stuff that
he's putting his dog's life in danger.
But he knows what's going to happen. I think he knows. All right,
he did know because then the Libyans came.
Okay, well, he didn't know that, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Let me throw my first high out there, and then I'm sure you've probably got notes on this, and we can talk a little bit more about it. The first high of the movie, as far as I'm concerned, are the characters, the duo of Marty McFly and Doc Brown. Mm-hmm. For my money, like there's not a better cinematic duo in movies than Marty McFly. Bob. Yeah, no, not even close to Doc Brown and Marty McFly.
I know it's not the same dynamic duo, but Batman and Robin.
No. And you wouldn't even initially think movies when you think Batman and Robin because they originate from comic books.
Frodo and Sam.
They originate from a book. You could do this all day.
Other duos.
I think that's they're
Bill
like
and Ted?
They're the
Wayne and Garth.
They're not better than Doc and Marty.
I'm thinking of them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, listen, it's a subjective opinion, but I would just say for my money, there isn't a better two-hander than Marty and Doc. They are the ultimate
two-hander. Kind of sounds like you're giving a stranger. What if you said on both of your hands and then?
Yes, that's a stranger.
It's a double
good.
stranger. Right?
That's good.
You're not gonna keep this in there.
I'm probably gonna have to. I'm getting tired of editing this shit, so I think we're gonna have to go warts and all with this one. Marty McFly for me, growing up, like as a kid, seeing this when I was 5 years old, the first time I saw this movie, he like defined what cool was, like skateboarding, guitar, video camera. Michael J. Fox is the
fighting
one
the big guys like David and Goliath.
Yeah, he had the cool laid back attitude. I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, this is something that's widely known now. But Michael J. Fox was not the original Marty McFly. In fact, they filmed for 5 weeks with
Eric Stoltz.
Yeah,
You're
so
welcome.
They filmed for 5 weeks with Eric Stoltz and replaced him because.
Same thing with the girlfriend. They had the girl from that plays Jen in The Office.
No, she was up for the role. She didn't. She wasn't cast. But I'm saying Eric Stoltz like played this character.
They shot shit with her in it.
No,
okay.
Eric Stoltz. They shot 5 weeks. They shot like half the movie or more than half the movie with this character, and eventually made the decision to say like we're going to scrap all this material, bring in Michael J. Fox, and reshoot basically half the. I mean, I can't even imagine. The scheduling setback, the amount of money that gets set back, but the idea was that he was playing it too stoic or too earnest or too there wasn't that element that would draw the audience into Marty McFly because the way Michael J. Fox plays it is so like kind of.
I'm just a kid in suburban America.
He's like partially laid back,
believable.
but he's also partially wide eyed. He kind of has the right
partially
temperament.
Clumsy.
Yeah. He's just got
kind
this
of the what do you call it? The misfit type a little bit. Doesn't entirely fit in. The audition, that's the next high I had when, Huey Lewis is conducting the auditions and stuff. Oh, it's good. You're just too dang loud. And, doesn't quite fit the mold.
But it's also like he's the way that he's playing the character. Like, it would be very easy to see this character be overly dramatic or put upon. Like, if you think about all the shit with, at the very beginning of the movie when he's kind of like taking it on the chin with everything and like, Dad, you promised me the car. Like, you could see that being, if that wasn't played with the exact right temperament, that it could come off as either like whiny or just too over dramatic. He strikes the right balance of just playing it to a comedic effect, but it's not overly comical. It's not overly dramatic. He just finds the exact right tone that I think is easy for people to like imprint themselves on as like, oh, I get Marty McFly. Like I get where this guy's coming from. And it could have easily also been just kind of like a really kind of stereotypical shitty 80s teenage kid. I've seen the movie so many times and I can't quite articulate what it is that he's doing in the performance that's so the right note.
It's what the French call that certain je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi. He's just,
I don't know what.
He's the best. And then Doc Brown is just one of the, I honestly don't know if I can think of a more iconic movie character than Doc Brown.
Lloyd, I know.
Just that like complete lunatic.
Well, it's funny, speaking of Robert Zemeckis and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Christopher Lloyd was the judge in that.
Yes, yeah.
So.
And scared the shit out of me as a kid too. I talk. As a kid, that scared the shit out of me. And I actually, as a kid, I always thought I was going to die laughing like one of the hyenas. I really thought that could happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, Doc Brown, just one of the greatest characters. He's got like this, his dialogue. He's got some of the funniest fucking lines ever in movie history. Like the when he refers to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance as a rhythmic ceremonial ritual, and then there's the whole scene later when he's showing Marty when they're planning how they're gonna harness the energy from the lightning bolt into the flux capacitor, and he's got the entire model built, and he says the thing where he's like,
"Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it." It's good. Oh, thank you.
It's like he went to all this trouble to build this whole thing to just show him this one example, and it's not built to scale or painted. Please pardon that. He just, everything the guy says is like comic genius, and I don't know that you could get a guy better than Christopher Lloyd to play that.
Definitely not. It's unlikely. It's in a time when, the idea of an older, secluded man, reclusive man, didn't have this sort of stigma attached to it. Like, oh yeah, what's this 17-year-old why is he running this guy's house after school? In his barn.
It was much more innocent times, wasn't it? Right. You would never even think that there was anything weird about that relationship. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I like it when he first gets back in 1955 and he finds Doc and he got that weird helmet on and the way he answers the door.
The face he makes when he opens the door.
And I like when he goes, "Great Scott!"
Great Scott!
Even beyond Marty and Doc, I would say another high in the movie is that there's not, I wrote this down, there's not a single wasted character. Every character in the movie, no matter how ancillary or how small, or even if they're just in it very, very, briefly, they're all kind of great and memorable characters.
Well, the thing about actually specific about all the characters that I wrote as a high too was that I love that they all originate in this town. It's like it's
Hill Valley.
It's not anybody from out of town or from across the sea. Like, it's just the story of the people in this town. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it adds to the way the movie feels.
Yeah,
it feels like a small town through the span of decades and how people's lives changed. And the mayor, what's his name? Goldie Wilson, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing is cute. You're gonna be mayor someday. Mayor,
That's a good idea. Right. George McFly, Lorraine Baines, Biff Tannen, like there's not a single wasted character. And Biff obviously is a high of the movie because he's like one of the ultimate.
To make like a tree and get the hell out of here.
Yeah, one of the ultimate movie bullies of all time.
Yeah. I do like when he walks into the malt shop. It's a malt shop, right? That's like the 50s thing, the malt shop. Like a place you get a root beer float and shit and dance fucking with your poodle skirt and the jukebox. When he walks in, I think it's when he's first introduced, he walks in and he's like, McFly, and they both turn around because it's him and his dad sitting there. I like that.
Once
They
they're-
both turn around. You know
Once
what I mean?
they're back in 55.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we gotta just pause and talk about is the DeLorean. Mm-hmm. I know in the original script,
It's an airplane without wings.
Yeah, well, the design of the car, and you know, obviously, like the DeLorean was discontinued, and all the crazy shit that happened with that.
Was it discontinued before this movie?
You know, I don't know. That's a really good
Because
question.
I bet if it was like this movie made it like back on in demand
well,
again.
that's a really
Put it
good.
back
You know,
in.
it's funny. As much as I love the DeLorean, I don't really know. I have to imagine it might have been discontinued. I really don't know. That's fucked up. That's research that I should
I
have
remember
done.
there was one person on the news like over 10 years ago buying all these random parts to recreate the DeLorean, like to build it.
There's tons of collectors. There's people. I mean, people have owned DeLoreans and they've got it
but
all
like
tricked
bought
out.
separate parts to make their own,
Yeah.
to build their own
Yeah,
DeLorean.
and then you see people who have it all tricked out to look exactly like the time machine with the flux capacitor and everything. But just the idea of making the DeLorean the time machine, and there's earlier drafts of the script where it's not a car, it's not a DeLorean, it's not even a vehicle. It's like I forget. I mean, there were so many different drafts of the script, but I remember that there were drafts where it was like Coca-Cola was the secret ingredient that powered it. Like it was kind of, I think it may have even been a telephone booth, and I think that they scrapped that, and then eventually the telephone booth is like what they use in Bill and Ted. But the DeLorean is just such an iconic image, just the way that car looked,
the way the doors open on the sides.
it just. I
I
could
think
not,
an IROC is probably the next closest thing.
Oh, that would have been so awful. That would have been terrible.
I'm joking.
It's like I honestly don't think that's one of those things that it could not be subbed out for anything else. You could not have replaced the DeLorean with any other car or any other device to I mean, there's something so perfect about the
I do
way
love
that
the
it looks.
scene where he crashes into the barn, and when he's first entering
Yes.
upon 1955, and the family kind of wanders in the barn like, what was that? And then that's what the line was I think it was the father that said, it's a space, or it's an airplane without wings. And then the little boy goes, no, it's not. And he pulls out the comic book, and it's like a flying saucer. And it's like, but it's also during a time when comic books were kind of starting to become, I mean, in those days, it was like, that's what little boys liked. They liked comics, they liked collecting baseball cards. You know what I mean? It was like that era. So it's funny to me. It's like, no, it's not. And then he shows him the sci-fi comic. And then I also love,
He gets
of the
up,
sci-fi
he's got the
thing.
radiation suit on.
Yeah.
And he's going to mutate in human form.
Right.
Take that, you mutated piece of shit.
But I like that. I don't even know if I wrote it down as a high, but it's making me think of it now with the whole sci-fi angle is when he meets his father, you know, back in 1955, and he's trying to convince him to go to the Enchantment Under the Sea, or to ask Lorraine to it and all this and that, and he's all, you know, wimping out about it. And then he convinces him that, or he calls in the middle of the night pretending to be some like evil alien
He's trying to be
guy.
Darth Vader.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
like,
using all these like,
and he believes it though.
Right, but
he looks at his comic. He's like, because this is a time when like that's what kids probably kind of not believed in, but like that was their escape from reality, was their comics and stuff.
all the stuff that Marty's saying are like pop culture references. He's like, my name is Darth Vader. I come from the planet Vulcan. You know, it's like it's all sci-fi references that George hasn't caught up to yet in time. You know what I mean? They come from Marty's day,
That's gonna
not
bother me
George's
now,
day.
not knowing what that show is.
The thing that I really love about this movie, and I think I wouldn't, to call anything a perfect movie, I think is hyperbolic. But the thing that's so great about this movie is the stakes that they establish. And what I mean by that is that there's, just the A plot, right? Just the conflict of a kid who gets sent back in time and he can't get home without a near impossible act of God. That would be enough as far as like having a concept and a conflict for our protagonist to have to overcome, right? But on top of that, on top of the A plot of Marty's sent back in time and he's got to get home, you then get the B plot of, not only does he interfere with the chain of events that leads to his parents meeting, but he redirects his mom's affection at him.
I know.
Which is
Calvin.
But
your name, I never met a guy with purple underwear.
I think, especially like watching it now as an adult, like I remember watching it as a kid, and it's like you're getting it, but it like the depth of it is not, it's lost on you. You don't realize how really fucked up that is. But I really think just rewatching it,
it's like reverse Oedipus complex.
But it's really ballsy that a mainstream movie, that not necessarily was made for kids, but is intended for kids to be able to watch, had that as a central conflict in it. Like that's actually that they had the balls to go there. Well, I like
when she finally kisses him, she like just stops. She goes, it's like kissing my brother.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah.
But I always thought,
you don't even know.
I know, but it's such an interesting, if you think about it, it actually kind of in a weird way, I know it's gross, but in a weird way, it kind of makes sense, because if you think about the fact that, George McFly is the person that she did fall in love with and have kids with. And even in this version of the story, eventually does fall in love with. So she's going to have some attraction to George McFly. Marty is an amalgamation of George McFly, the guy that she eventually falls in love with, and herself. Mm-hmm. So in a weird way, the attraction kind of makes sense in a weird, you know what I'm saying? Like, it makes sense that she would be attracted to someone who's half the man that she falls in love with and half herself.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it does.
Does that, am I talking out of my ass?
No, of course. No, it does make sense. Another thing I wrote down that I don't want to get too far away from the beginning of the movie, because it's kind of the beginning of the movie is there something else you want to say?
No, I was just going to, there was one other thing I was going to add to it was to say, like, and then even beyond the B plot or the B conflict of, so you've got Marty's got to get home. Marty's sent back in time and he can't get home. A conflict. B conflict. He's endangered his own existence by stopping his parents from meeting and now making his mom attracted to him. And then C conflict. He wants to warn Doc about his impending death. Mm-hmm. The fact that Doc has been gunned down in the future, and he's now got to not only deal with trying to get back home, trying to get his parents back together, but also trying to find a way to be able to warn Doc to not get killed when they get back to the future.
Right. And he doesn't want to know.
It's like the stakes are, they just mount, and there's so much kind of stuff for Marty to have to do for this all to go right in the end. And it's like I said, there's not a moment that's wasted. The script is just so tightly written, and that's
what makes it such a multifaceted story. I mean, that's what makes it great, is all those different angles, and that the stakes are always, like you said, they're always evolving, but it's also always keeping you like, oh no, what if this happens? And that's the whole point, to keep us in suspense or to keep us on the edge of our seats. Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to say before I get too much away from it, because it's sort of the beginning of the movie and I don't want to get too carried away and then I want to go back to the beginning of the movie again. But one of the things I liked was the scene where he's riding through the town on his skateboard and he's like hitched to the back of a truck, and like that's how he gets around, is like he just like puts his hands on the back of a truck and like wheels himself around in someone else. I'm like, yeah, because I just think of a world like if that was today, like somebody would be like dead stopping and try to beat you with a baseball bat or something. I don't know. They'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Get off my car. But then I like how in that same scene, it's like he's with his girlfriend or whatever, and doesn't she like write down her phone number or something? Yeah. Why would you write down your phone number if you're already going out?
Well, she was staying at her grandmother's house that night.
Maybe that's what it was. And then the number, of course, was a 555, and I was just laughing about that because that was like a thing back in the day. And I don't know if they still do that in movies, but that was always the thing back in the day. It was like anytime you saw a phone number, it was 555, and because some idiot's gonna triangle that number.
That's what happens.
I don't know if they still do that on TV.
When the last time I remember, the last time I remember reading about that was, I think when Bruce Almighty came out.
Right. It was a real phone number.
There was a scene where Bruce Almighty gives his phone number, or Jim Carrey's character gives his phone number to somebody, and it wasn't a 55 number.
Like, oh my God, this is God?
No. There was some poor old woman in Florida that the weekend that movie came out, like called the newspapers and was like crying, saying like, I've gotten in the past 2 days, like, 779 phone calls of people asking for God. Like, why is this happening to me?
Right, exactly. Like the poor thing. Like, and she probably had no idea, of course, what's going on.
No, why are people calling my house every 5 seconds asking for God? Yeah. So that's why they have to do 555, because people are fucking idiots and they will try to call a number that they see in a movie. The other thing is, I don't think we can go by without commenting on Alan Silvestri's score.
Of course not. Right?
I keep saying favorite of all time, but really, like, the Alan Silvestri score is my favorite film score of all time.
It's a great score when it's like you can hear just a couple bars of it and you know exactly, like, you know what I mean? It's so distinctive. It's not like anything. There's some scores, and I don't want to name certain film scores that I can think of, that are talented, but every movie they do, it's sort of the same thing they're doing with
this is very
instrumentation distinct. And all of that, and their arrangement. exactly, this movie, like Star Wars with John Williams, like there's certain films that you hear just a little bit of it. Lord of the Rings, you're watching again, Howard Short's like, like there's certain things you're like, you know exactly what movie that is when you hear it. And yeah, you can't touch the score for this movie.
Yeah. And
we have it on vinyl. You found it in a record store.
And not only that, it's just, it feels like it fits the content of the like there's something that it's just so well matched to the story.
It's exciting. It's an exciting sounding score. It invokes I don't know, adventure.
It builds. It has those
adventure
moments,
and hope.
Yeah,
and
it has those moments where it
wonder.
builds and builds and builds, and then it has those weird moments where it's like bum 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 bum, and
it's just perfect.
And it just I don't know how to, again, I can't articulate this the way I want to right now, but it fits the story so well. And I think if you pulled the score out of this movie, it would be like half as effective.
Like if you got different actors, I know it's like they really,
every element had to come together to make this thing as perfect and beautiful as it is.
Right. And I know there's something to be said for the fact that like it could have been a different film score, there could have been different actors. It might not have been a bad movie, even it just wouldn't have been the same.
No,
you know,
no, definitely not.
I like the scene where he's back in time and it says, they say, I think it was it his mom? Little Joey loves it in his playpen. He cries whenever we take him out. It's like, get used to life behind bars.
Yeah, Uncle Joe Joey.
Yeah, I like that.
At the very, yeah.
And he's in his crib, like behind the bars.
He
never wants to get out of his crib. He loves it there. You know?
Better get used to these bars, kid. They do such a great job too of like setting up how kind of sad and pathetic Marty's family is in the beginning of the movie, where you just see that like his brother works for a fast food thing, his mom's an alcoholic, George is this complete fucking pathetic pushover. You know, it's like his life is such shit at the beginning of the movie, and he's still,
that's why it pays off in the end when the role reversal happens. Now Biff,
and that you see that everything that he did affected the future in a positive way, that he kind of made them all deal with a lot of the issues that didn't get dealt with at that time.
True, right.
That because of that, it pays off so great. I mean, if George McFly didn't eventually stand up to Biff, he was going to be, you know,
a doormat for Biff
his whole life, and Lorraine was going to be miserable, and his kids were going to be, you know, discontented. It was like that, the idea of him going back and fucking things up so that he could fix them pays off in dividends at the end of the movie. It's just such a...
But then, okay, this might sound really stupid now. I'm just thinking about it. Like, because I know how it all shakes out when Marty goes back in time and the Enchantment Under the Sea dance happens, and, you know, Biff's going to basically date rape her in the car, and then, what's his dad's name?
George
McFly, right. George comes to the car to save whatever and punches him and all that. Like, what was supposed to have happened in the original chain of events when... Because he still ends up marrying her, but she's, you know... She's less than enthused.
Well, the original chain of events was that when
she marries him, so it's like
no. But the original chain of events, that what originally happens, and she tells it at the beginning of the movie, is he falls out of it. Well, he falls out of a tree, and because
he's a peeping Tom,
and that's the whole thing. As she says to him, she's like, "What were you doing? Bird watching? What, Lorraine? What?" But the whole thing is, he falls out of the tree, and the dad hits him with the car. And she feels so bad for him that she starts to date him.
When in actuality, when Marty goes back in future, that's what happens to him.
He pushes him out of the way instinctively to try and help him, and then he gets hit with the car, and now he becomes the love interest. Yeah. But it would have never even got to the point where, you know, Marty has to set that whole thing up in the car at the end because she wants to go with him. So he has to create a scenario where, like, all right, I'm gonna take advantage of her.
You mean you're gonna go touch her on her... No, George.
That whole set of circumstances is like a new set of circumstances that wouldn't have happened had George gotten hit by the car. She just would have... I understand better. The Florence Nightingale effect. Like, yeah. I think Doc calls it that at one point.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back and do some more highs and lows. Or if there's any lows.
I think I gave mine. I'll say it for the end. I'll say it again.
Okay, well.
I do have one. I'm glad I have one low. I'm glad I do have one low.
Just to be fair and balanced?
Yep.
All right.
I totally do. You know, it's funny because I remember seeing it and I didn't like it, but I didn't write it down. It just didn't occur to me to write it down. But like, yeah, I should almost focus more on what I don't like because there's so many things to like about this movie.
All right, cool. We'll be right back with some more movie high-low.
21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts. My God!
What the hell is a gigawatt?
Let's talk a little bit about favorite scenes in the movie. Do you have a favorite scene or a couple of favorite scenes?
I mean, the scene where Doc is in the high school with him, with Marty and his parents, and like seeing the whole thing, and the whole rhythmic ceremonial ritual, whatever, and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's funny.
He's got that great line.
I love the Van Halen scene. He puts Van Halen in the tape, cassette, fucking the Walkman, whatever. Yeah. It's Van Halen, and he thinks it's like aliens or something. I don't know.
He's got the great line in that scene where when Marty keeps saying this is heavy, and he's like heavy. There's that word again.
Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull? What?
Who doesn't love the scene where George McFly goes to punch him in the face and like, you know what I mean? Like,
oh, well, I put that down. I put down that's one of the greatest knockouts. I mean, that's the thing. He telegraphs. I mean, the fact that he connected with that hit at all, that punch is so super telegraphed that he's really lucky that if he I mean, I think part of it is Biff is looking at him like, this kid's clenching his fist. Is this kid really gonna punch me? Because the
right,
that's
like,
coming.
I know, he's like,
that's coming from like around the corner. You know what I mean? Like,
I know, he spins when he does it too.
Well, that's the best part of it. Is
he
when
throws his whole dorky body into it,
flings them all around, and he hits the ground. It's the build
I do
up of the
actually
music.
like, as a whole, I do like the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. When I think about it too, like, I love the music and stuff, but I like the scene where it's like, you know, he's calling his Uncle Barry Gordy, you know. Or Chuck Berry. No, it's Chuck Berry's Barry Gordy. It's Barry Gordy. No, it's Chuck Berry. Okay.
This is your cousin, Marvin Berry.
Barry Gordy's Motown. Okay, right. Yeah, exactly. Marvin Berry's like, well, you know that new sound you've been looking for? Well, listen to this. And it's like Johnny B. Good. I mean, it's so good.
The Johnny B. Good scene is probably...
Our wedding, we had our wedding band do like all the songs from the movie too, so it's a lot of fun.
Johnny B. Good scene's probably, if I had to pick a favorite scene in the movie, that's probably my favorite scene. Because that was, I literally remember that was like the thing.
I like the very last note he's playing. He's bending the pitch on the guitar.
Well, that he just
kind of stops and looks at everybody, and they're all like,
he just overdoes it. He gets way too into it. They're with them for a while, and then once he starts getting into 80s glam rock,
I know,
it's like it's all over.
Right.
But the Johnny B. Good scene is probably
shredding that fucking thing.
Probably my favorite scene in the movie, just because I remember that was, I used to go nuts when I was a kid watching it. I remember that was the thing that made me want to play guitar. Obviously, like I also love the scene when he first gets back to 1955 and has to convince Doc as to who he is, and he has to go through the whole retelling of the story of him learning about the flux capacitor. You fell off your toilet trying to hang a clock, and that's when you had the idea for the flux capacitor, which is what makes time travel possible. And he goes through that whole thing and reconvinces Doc, and then he shows Doc the time machine. He shows him the DeLorean that's been hidden, and it's like he's looking at it like, oh my god, I built something that worked. I also love, this is like one of the cool things I thought was really interesting, because it becomes a big part of Doc not wanting to know, you know, too much about the future, but also clearly being aware of it. There's the one scene where Marty comes back from school, and Doc has the camcorder that Marty was filming everything with when he's showing him the time machine and they're doing the experiment. Oh god, hold on. So obviously the introduction to the DeLorean and them showing how it works, which is when the scene you were saying, there's going to be one of your lows where they put Einstein in it, and he sets the whole thing off, and they're standing there as the DeLorean comes flying at them, and Marty tries to get out of the way, and he's holding him. You're like, no, because he believes, he knows it's going to work. And when it zips by and disappears, when it hits 88 and you see the fire trails, like that's just amazing.
Oh, I know you love that scene at the end of the movie, right?
Oh, we got to talk about, because the last 15 minutes of the movie is its own entire section of high for me. But
I do like the scene where the clock tower scene where like the cable is stuck onto the tree branch, and he's like,
God. It just gives me, I just get like, I get argent.
It's like a matter of seconds he has, and then that happens. Like, and he zip lines down it, and the part where Marty comes back and Doc is, you hear him, like you don't see it, but you hear like he's rewinding the tape, and it's, oh my god, they found me. I don't know how they found me, but they found me. Run for it, Marty! And he keeps, and you're hearing and seeing
the Doc is watching the clip from the video camera leading up to when he gets shot. So you can tell that Doc knows something bad happened to him. Mm-hmm. But when Marty tries to elaborate is when he's like, I can't know too much about the future. Right. You know, and that becomes a central part of the movie, is that Marty is trying to figure out when is the right time and place to let him know.
And he keeps looking at the photograph of him and his brother and sister and like, and then disappearing.
He's disappearing. I always thought that was weird. That I guess it makes sense that the brother disappears first.
Why? Because he's the
older brother. I in a weird way, I always thought, like, thinking more on it that Marty would disappear first, but I guess yeah, it would
and then eventually he would.
And then you see at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance that his hand is starting to disappear. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love that scene. Obviously, you know, the whole skateboarding scene where they crash, where Marty's getting chased around by Biff and the guys, and they crash in the manure. Mm-hmm. This is a total staple. I mean, there's so many staples. The Flux capacitor, 88 miles per hour, 1.21 gigawatts.
The hoverboard.
That's in the sequel. We should talk about the sequels a little bit too.
I don't remember that well. I know one's in the Wild West. That third one.
I hate the third one. The third one's the one I don't ever.
Is that the Wild West one?
Yeah, it's the one where they go back to the West.
They filmed the chick from Step Brothers. Isn't the
they filmed 2 and 3 at the same time because Back to the Future 1 was so successful. So Back to the Future 1, when it ends and it says to be continued, that was added it was added for the home video release. It wasn't actually in the theatrical version of the movie. It didn't say to be continued because
it didn't know it was going to be successful.
You know what I mean? And also it's one of those things where, like, sometimes just like leaving the audience with, oh, they're going to go on another adventure is good enough. Mm-hmm. But obviously it was very successful and they made 2 and 3. And I can say that I've always thought the original was the best movie, but I can honestly say as a kid, 2 was my favorite one to watch. Even though I knew the first one was the better movie, 2 was the one that I liked to watch just because of the vision of 2015. You know, the future, like how,
what that looked like. And of course it's still so, it's like,
we didn't get any of it. We were supposed to get hoverboards and flying cars and power laces.
I like how older movies are, like, it's not that old, but, like, you know, old enough that their idea of the future still looks old.
It didn't though. I even now when I watch Back to the Future 2, it
doesn't have perms and acid wash jeans.
Well, yeah, the fashion, but the look of the future, like they really created an amazing 2015, and you know, just all the crazy details, the idea of like the jackets that can you know instantly air dry, and just all the little wacky idiosyncrasies that they came up with for that movie. I still, Back to the Future 2, I still love to watch. I still think it's a really, really worthy sequel. And what makes Back to the Future 2 kind of really interesting as a sequel is that it kind of, for as good of a sequel as it is, it kind of commits a lot of the cardinal sins of a bad movie sequel. Like, the biggest cardinal sin a movie sequel can commit is that it is a retread of the first movie. And I don't think you can watch Back to the Future 2 and not immediately see that it's like the scene, you know, the scene where the skateboarding scene with Biff chasing him becomes the hoverboard scene. Mm-hmm. The whole Johnny Be Good scene is there. But the thing that makes it interesting and the thing that kind of subverts the way that they're kind of retreading the first movie is that it's almost intended that way. They, you know, the hoverboards becomes an interesting way for them to redo that scene in the future. When they go back to the Johnny Be Good scene, they're literally, the characters are revisiting that scene in the movie. So it's Marty watching Marty on stage. So they found a way to, in a weird way, commit the cardinal sin, but at the same time subvert it. Even like Crispin Glover, when they have old George McFly, it's not old George McFly. It's not Crispin Glover. Like, for whatever contractual reasons, he didn't get the money he wanted, so they didn't bring him back. But I remember watching that movie as a kid, not realizing it wasn't Crispin Glover because he's an old age makeup. It almost doesn't need to be him in a certain way. You know, I don't
remember those movies. I don't remember the sequels as well as you do, especially having not rewatched them. I mean, I've seen them like once or twice maybe, but I can't like.
Really? We've only watched Back to the Future 2 once or twice?
And 3, I don't know, not enough that I would.
3 I'd never watched.
And certainly not recently enough that I'm going to remember everything you're remembering, but.
Yeah, 2, I mean, like I said, 2 is still awesome, and it's still a worthy.
That's the one where it's the hard way or the easy way, right?
The easy way.
Billy Zane's
Billy Zane gets a little bit more face time, and they do, and that's the other thing too. They redo that exact same scene when Marty wakes up in Lorraine's bed, and he's like, "Oh, and he thinks it's his mother, but he doesn't know that it's the young version of Lorraine. I had this horrible dream. I went back in time. Oh, it's okay. You're right here and safe in 1955. 1955, and he wakes up. It's the same exact scene in Back to the Future 2, where it's him being like, I had this horrible dream, and it's like now it's the older version of them in this demented future. But yeah, I mean, again, like I'm not shitting on Back to the Future 2. I fucking love Back to the Future 2. It's one of the good examples of how you can do a sequel well, but I just think it's interesting that it does borrow so much of the original plot. It really is retreading so much of the original plot, but it's doing it in an interesting way. And then the big advantage to Back to the Future 2, I think, is always the fact that it has that demented version of 1985 that they go back to. So you really understand the consequences of the alternate timeline, like they do. And this is a little bit like expository for the audience. Like they have to literally have Doc Brown kind of drawing it on a chalkboard to be like, no, we went back to this 1955. For
those of you that didn't see the first one.
And we changed it. And because we changed it, the 1985 that we're in now. So if we go back here, it's going to be the alternate like we've created an entire new timeline. Yeah. And that took, I mean, they had to do that because that took a lot of having to wrap the audience's mind around it.
I actually just thought of something else that I did like too, like I'm thinking of small things from the movie that I like when you ask like favorite scenes and stuff. I like when he goes back and he sees the homeless guy on the bench again. He's like,
crazy drunk driver.
So good to see you. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Whatever the guy's name is, but it's like, he's so relieved to see him because it's a symbol of...
Well, because 1955 Hill Valley looks so beautiful and pristine, and 1985 Hill Valley just is complete shit. Yeah, but he's like, oh, this looks beautiful.
Kind of like most neighborhoods, you know. It's like a lot of them have lost their luster. Even the town we live in now, we've joked walking around because there's a little clock tower and stuff, and it has that sort of small town suburban
clock tower. That's always
vibe. So I'm like, it kind of reminds me of Hill Valley a little bit out here now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was different in the 50s.
The last 15 minutes of the movie, to me, and I've always maintained this, is like, that is, to me, what movie magic is. Once they leave the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, which again, like in and of itself is an amazing sequence. But once it's the race to...
It's actually a rhythmic ceremonial ritual.
The rhythmic ceremonial.
Get your terminology
right.
But
once it is now the race to getting the time machine to hit the chord at the exact right moment that lightning strikes the clock tower, that just becomes like one of the most exciting sequences in any movie I've ever seen.
So suspenseful.
And that's
like I said, whenever he sees the cord stuck under the tree, like you think he's so close, and he goes, ah!
Well, because there's so much, there's so much going on at that point in the movie where he's got to do this just right.
Don't worry. As long as you hit that wire with a connecting hook at precisely 88 miles an hour, the instant the lightning strikes the tower, everything will be fine.
He's got to execute this exactly right. You got the music, you got Alan Silvestri's score that's just jamming at this point and like pumping all the energy into it. And then Marty, who writes him the letter, and Doc rips up the letter and he won't look at it. And Marty knows, he's like, I have to warn him. And then the circuits break, and he's telling him, you gotta get back. You gotta get enough road so you can get back to 88 miles an hour. And he's got to get up on top of the clock tower and reconnect the circuits that broke. And then Marty's trying to yell at him to tell him, because he's far enough away, I gotta tell you about the future. And he gets in the car and he drives back, and the car stalls, and Doc connects the circuits, and the fucking thing falls, and thank God he's wearing corduroys because it grabs onto his leg and he can reconnect the circuit. But when he pulls it, it's too tight, and then he pulls the wire at the bottom. It's like that whole, I know exactly shot for shot what's going to happen, but every time I watch it, my heart rate is just pounding, you know, and that's just a testament to how timeless that is as filmmaking, is that you just get, and then the beautiful, when he finally hits the thing, when he finally hits he connects the fuse, it goes into the flux capacitor, it disappears, and it's everything goes quiet, and it's the shot of Doc running back down the street, and it's
you just hear that little bit of the
that
score.
single horn. Doo-doo-doo. It's just, I just get chills thinking about it. It's just, it's perfect.
Brings a tear to your eye every time.
It's just beautiful. It's like there's nothing like it.
That is cinema at its finest.
And and again, like I'm looking at Hill Valley, and you know it's a fucking movie set, and you know what, this is a crazy plot, but you're with it. You there's nothing about it that's false, even knowing that it's a movie. There's something so emotionally satisfying about that last 15 minutes of the movie, and then of course, we get into the kind of the postscript of the film when Marty gets back, and you see he gets back a couple minutes before he sees Doc get shot. He sees the Libyans chasing after him, and they crash after the DeLorean disappears. And then there's the great payoff of Doc Brown is now wearing a bulletproof vest, and Marty's like, "You told me," and you see that Doc taped together the note that he ripped up. Mm-hmm. Right. And he's like, what about all that nonsense about, not the space-time continuum? And what the hell?
I know, right?
Which is kind of like...
It's like, wouldn't you, right? A lot of people don't want to know what their demise would be, but at the same time, it's like, at a certain point, would you be like, okay, I have to read this?
Yeah, and not only that, but also it's one of those things where it's like,
I have to know.
Hey, man, it's a really good thing those Libyans with the machine guns shot center mass and didn't, shoot you in the fucking face, because... Right. So that's one of those things that even like Doc's kind of like, what the hell? It's a little bit of you have to kind of just go with it and say, okay, all right, we want Doc to live, so this is a nice payoff,
right?
Because their relationship is so great, and then now seeing that because George finally stood up for himself, he's so much better. He became a writer. That was another great scene I didn't talk about when Marty's sitting with him,
talking to his dad at lunch, and he's talking about how he's a discouraged writer, like no one believes in him, or they think
he's like,
weird.
I write these. He's like, I didn't know you did anything creative. Mm-hmm. And he's like, can I see this? He's like, no, I don't let anyone read my stories. What if they said they didn't like them? What if they, I don't.
And then he's thinking of his audition where he was told by Huey Lewis that he was too loud.
And it's the same thing that he says to his girlfriend, that he says to Jennifer when she's saying, you should send this to the record labels. And he's like, well, what if they say they don't like it? What if I don't know if I can take that.
Yeah.
And it's a moment where he finally is like, I didn't know that you had a creative side to you. Not only that, I didn't realize we had this in common, and that I have the same insecurity that you have.
And to be on the other side of the conversation, wow, I can tell that you should just go for it. Like, why would you be?
And conceptually, it's such a great concept to think about. You only know your parents as your parents in the generation that they are now. If you were to go back to their day and observe them in their day when they were your age.
Exactly.
I mean,
as a peer.
It would fucking blow your mind if you really thought about that. It would be really bizarre to see who they were when they were the age that you were. So that's a concept that I don't think will ever get old.
I'm just thinking of a fun fact too. Were we on our honeymoon when they had, was it Jimmy Kimmel or something? And
we were on our honeymoon. We were on our honeymoon when it was October 21st, 2015.
Is that what the date was?
That's the date that they go back to in Back to the Future.
And you watched it on TV, and it was Michael J. Fox and
on Jimmy
Lloyd.
Kimmel. They did that, which was awesome. But no, it was the anniversary. It was 2015. The
but I remember watching that.
I
was like, look at this.
Yeah, it was great.
And they both look old, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. And people go fucking nuts because they are one of the greatest cinematic duos of all time. Like Doc and Marty our kids will watch Doc and Marty. Our kids' kids,
it's a huge following.
They will know who Doc and Marty are.
I know, it's like there's certain Disney. I mean, I teach pre-K, so it's funny to me when I see things that my kids are into that, like, oh, I grew up with that too, like The Lion King or Aladdin, but like they know the old ones that we grew up on. Or
this is what I will say though, and this is something.
101 Dalmatians.
This is something that I really like. This is one of those movies that I think is really. It would be sacrilege if they ever tried to remake this.
I'm surprised they haven't.
But you know what I'm saying?
I feel like they remake everything.
But this is one of those movies that there would be no victory to be had if this movie to be. This is one of those movies that should just
trying.
It should just be left.
And he'd be into dubstep. He'd be like a dubstep DJ, wannabe DJ instead, or something. I don't know. Even that's probably passe.
I don't know, but whatever they. I mean, that will be the day. There are certain properties that really just need to be left the fuck alone. And this is one where, we we've got the perfect Back to the Future. It is timeless. Even if it's dated in terms of it being from the 1980s and the music and the fashion and shit, like there's no reason to ever remake this movie.
Right.
There's no good
untouchable.
There's no good argument that it could ever be mounted that that would be a cool idea. Oh, if we did it with these actors or
it's like it's I don't want to say it's defamation, it's desecration in a way. If you were to do that, it'd be like desecrating the beauty and everything that this movie was in its purest form by trying to take it and remake it.
And it's like, we've
There's
seen
harsher language I could use that I'm not going to use because I don't want to,
There's a lot of things I could say right now that I'm not going to say.
Again, I will say that for The Sopranos.
It's like we're not, what we saw happen with Ghostbusters. There's certain things that you just like, and I always loved Ghostbusters, but I always loved Back to the Future more than Ghost. Like Back to the Future to me really is hollow ground. Like
right.
it is so seminal and important, and
that's like Who Framed Roger Rabbit with me.
Yeah, and I think everyone has there's maybe a one or two things that are real big touchstones or like attachments that you have. Mm-hmm. I don't think this could ever be done better.
Absolutely not.
Is there
and to do that would just be wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like I guess you could equate to like song covers and stuff too. I mean,
song covers?
To say like there's some songs you just shouldn't cover, no, or like a song that you would take and do in a different way, is it taking away from the pure integrity of what the song originally was in some way? I mean, I guess depending on what the song is.
The one thing I remember hearing about, I remember reading about this a while ago, and this would be interesting, but even still, I don't know that it's necessary. Is they talked about if they were to do a Back to the Future 4, how it would be like there'd be another kid and Marty would kind of be like the new Doc Brown. And I'm like, okay, I mean, okay. But at the same time, I just feel like it would be.
It's too much.
It just doesn't, we don't need it. And I don't think we needed 3. I love 2. I think we could have ended with 1. I love 2. If we had ended on 2, that would have been fine. I'm one of those people I will never.
They did 3 for a paycheck then. It was a successful franchise and they're just capitalizing on that.
They wanted to bring it full circle with now going to the era that, where they go to kind of the immediate past, like 30 years, then they go into the future. And then
it's always
a
year that ends in 5, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it's 1885 or something?
1885. And that's the thing is that like Doc Brown mentions at one point how that's one of the places he always wanted to go was to the Wild West, was to go to. So I understand why they did it. And 3 really becomes more about Doc's story in a lot of ways. But it just isn't, it's not a movie. The way that if Back to
know enough about the characters that you need to know and want to know from the first, like to dig beyond that, it's almost like, I don't want to say like an invasion of the characters that you love privacy, but it's like, it's a perfect story, and to do more with it, it's like bastardizing it in a way almost. I
mean, the trilogy is fine as is. This is how I look at it. If Back to the Future 1 is on cable television, edited with commercials, if I catch it anywhere in it, I'm going to sit down and watch it. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, it's just one of those movies. Like, I have to sit there. If Back to the Future 2 is on, edited with commercials, I'm going to sit down and watch it. If Back to the Future 3 is on, 9 times out of 10, I can click off. Like, it's just not one of those movies that I have as much love and reverence for. Right. And I just think it's kind of boring, to be honest. But all that being said, I really don't think that, I think that just the first movie in and of itself is self-contained, is kind of perfect and
yeah, I totally agree.
Amazing. Do you have any other highs?
I did there's a lot of pianos in this movie, and I like that. At Doc's, there was that old upright. Then there's the white piano when he returns to 1985. That's really, really pretty, like the nice house, because like there's the whole thing where in the beginning of the movie you see in 1985 in the beginning what his home looks like, and then at the end when the chain of events changes and now they have this beautiful home and his dad is successful and Biff's the asshole fucking buffing the car, Biff buffing, whatever. But they had this beautiful white piano. They had this beautiful white piano in the house. And I feel like there was another one in there that I didn't write down, but I was like, oh, I like all the pianos, of course. But
lows.
Now, Biff, my one low is
you don't like that they put Einstein in the car and the DeLorean.
Can I say it?
I'm sorry. Pardon me.
Well, one of my lows, my only low, I didn't really have it going into this podcast, and then I remembered, I didn't like that scene, and I should make that my low because I didn't like it. is that they put poor little Einstein in the car when they first introduced the DeLorean and what it can do. And I feel like he's almost like a test monkey or something. Like, Doc doesn't mind if something bad happens to him. Well, it better be the dog and not me. It's better off the dog and not me. And to me, that's kind of shitty. I'm sorry.
I think Doc knew it was going to work. Or
I'm like, poor little Einstein.
Yeah.
I feel like he doesn't give a shit.
No,
I mean,
he
definitely doesn't give a shit. Look, he's got an automatic timer that's feeding him and dumping schlop into a bowl that's got old schlop in it. Who knows when that bowl's been washed? He doesn't give a fuck. He's too busy to give a fuck. So I kind of feel like poor little Einstein is a little bit of a neglected, abused dog.
I don't think
to be
he's
honest,
neglected and abused.
A little bit.
I don't know.
A little bit.
I think that's a reach. I think
that's one
bit of a reach.
flaw in Doc's character.
Well, Einstein was with him, so even though the bowl was getting filled with stuff, Einstein was with him, so I'm sure he was taking care of him.
When I give Gizmo wet food, I make sure to clean it in between.
I
don't just pile on.
Doc, like most brilliant
fresh on
people,
top
I'm
of
sure he lived.
shit.
I'm sure he lived a cluttered and kind of chaotic life.
That's what I'm saying, the kind of life that lends itself to not being able to truly care about a pet or anyone else.
So I've got the very nitpicky one, but this one always bothered me a little bit because at the end of the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, there's a moment where Marty is saying goodbye to Lorraine, to his mom, and to his dad, George. And it's actually a really beautiful little scene because he helped them find their way to each other.
I'm just happy for George because he's going to get some action finally.
Finally. Well, he was going to get, but now he's his own man.
I'm sorry.
Now he's his own man. And the thing is that there's this beautiful little scene with them.
Sorry.
I'm keeping that in there. There's this beautiful little scene with them where he's kind of saying goodbye and they're thanking him, and it's more significant because of what we know versus what they know, is that like how hard that was to make that happen between the two of them. And that they found their way to each other and that they're better off now, that they're going to have a better relationship because of how they found their way, rather than she just pities him because he got hit by the car and, he's this pathetic piece of shit. Like, he stood up for himself. He became his own man. But, and then he does there's the little joke that he adds where he's just like, if you guys ever have an 8-year-old kid who accidentally sets fire to the living room rug, go easy on him, And the scene is fine. He runs away. We got to get to the DeLorean. And there's this extra line that just doesn't need to be there. And it's when the camera pushes in on Lorraine and she goes, Marty, such a nice name. As if to imply. I
like it so much that if I have a child, I would name it that.
I'll name my third kid. We're going to have a son, a daughter. We know girls named Marty. We personally know girls named Marty. And then a third, like the third kid is the one we'll name. Like it's just one of those things where it doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Why you like Marty has already inspired. He inspires rock and roll. He's the one that chose Chuck Berry.
The one thing I'll give the benefit of the doubt to with that is that, what about people that name their kids after themselves? It is not the firstborn. A lot of times it is the firstborn. Like, my dad is named Robert and my oldest brother is Robert Gerard Sampson II, But sometimes you do see it happen in later children, and it could be for a number of reasons. Like, in that case, it could be because maybe you didn't think you were going to have more than one or two, and you liked this name better than you liked naming the child after yourself, or you liked this name at the time better than you liked Marty, and then by the time you got to the third kid, you were like, oh yeah, remember that
Marty? Guy? I don't
you like that name
that.
Darian, for instance, right? What if we end up not deciding to name our first son, if we have Darian, and then we have another one, and then okay, well now.
But if there was some person in our life,
to play devil's advocate,
there was some person in our life that like made some kind of strange impact on us, and one of us looked at each other and was like, wow, Darian, that's such a nice name. It's like tag. It's just an extra thing, a little cutesy extra moment that doesn't need to be on that scene, because it doesn't make any sense that we're going to name the third kid Marty. It's like it would be like that would be prevalent in their minds.
I'm playing devil's advocate, but yes, on a whole, you would think it would be the first child that would have that name if she likes it so much. And again, they like it so much.
It's one of those things that I had seen 1,000 times before I ever even.
It's a bit of a nitpick, but at the same time, is it really a nitpick?
It's a nitpick. It's a total nitpick. It doesn't hurt the movie, but it's just one of those things that doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
I'm saying the more you think about it, it kind of.
Marty's the youngest child. If the whole cute moment was, look how Marty, these kids are riding around on these stupid, not tricycles, whatever they are, but he rips the thing off and invents the skateboard, right? Marty invented the skateboard.
Scooter, right?
Marty invented rock and roll because he's playing this awesome jam, and Marvin,
he invented John F. Kennedy.
You know what I'm saying? If it's all
the
these
hell is
it's all
John
these
F.
cute
Kennedy?
it's all these cute little moments where Marty did something that has a bigger impact on the
He
future.
invented Calvin Klein underwear.
He invented Calvin Klein. He invented reruns.
and Van Halen.
He invented
He's
Van
the original
Halen. He
guitarist of
invented
Van Halen.
Darth Vader. He
Who was
invented
Sammy Hagar?
Planet Vulcan, right? All these little cute moments. And it's like this one extra one that doesn't make any sense where it's like, yeah, Marty, that's a great, again, just a nitpick. But here's another one I always think about. If all of Marty's exploits in the past create a completely different future for him, right? When you look at Marty's at the beginning of the film, when you look at the beginning, Marty's clearly coming from like a lower middle class family. His mom's an alcoholic. His dad is probably like a lower management type of guy. They got a shitty car. When the future he comes back to, he's got a pimped out house.
That's what I was saying. And they have the beautiful white piano in it.
Yeah, his beautiful white piano. So here's the thing. His entire life, because of what he changed in the past, because of the family
His
dynamic.
father from being a chump to a champ.
Do you think that Marty would have had the exact same kind of life that would have led him to have met Doc Brown? Think about it like this.
No, I know.
Think about it like this. Marty's a lower class kid or a middle lower class kid who's on the fringes and meets this kind of weirdo guy.
Which is why he relates to him.
Who he gets along with.
What else am I going to do? Go home to my alcoholic mom and my miserable family?
If Marty comes now from an upper class family, don't you think Marty would be wearing a cardigan like, who's this white-haired lunatic? Sorry, buddy, I've got my own 4x4 to drive.
You make an interesting argument.
And if that happened,
nature versus nurture debate.
And here's the other part. If that happened, if all of a sudden Marty in the future version of Marty never has the circumstance to meet Doc Brown, well, then he never goes back in time. And if he never goes back in time, he never changes George and Lorraine. It becomes this cosmic loop where is time really changed? This is the thing about time travel movies is that there's always a pin. You can just pop that balloon so easily because of
the
how
smallest thing.
Fragile.
I sneezed right now, and that changed the course of events.
Everything changes. So again, that's one of
really
those.
Scary.
That's one of those things that you can't think too much about because if you start to go down that path and think like, well, if Marty never meets Doc, like does the circumstances of Marty's upbringing in this new family dynamic change the fact that maybe he would ever meet Doc?
I think it's a fair argument. It could go either way, but it definitely. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it could be a hindering factor in him developing the relationship that he had in the original storyline or timeline with Doc.
So that is not a plot hole, but certainly food for thought, I would say. Back to the Future fans. Rewatch Back to the Future, get to that last scene, look at the Marty McFly that you're seeing now and the Marty McFly homestead, how it's changed, and ask yourself, would Marty McFly's life have changed significantly enough that he may not have ever met or become friends with Doc Brown? Something to think about. Did you have any other ones?
The car's wrecked. What's that? And then Karma's a bitch, Biff?
So, no, because at the beginning of the movie, Biff crashes George's car. Mm-hmm. And Marty comes home because he's going to borrow the car to go out with Jennifer so he can, like you said, you can get knuckle deep. But the point is that when he gets. I was saying
that more about George and Lorraine though.
No, but when I'm at the beginning of the movie, he's going to they're going to go out to the lake.
Yeah.
And he's going to borrow his dad's car. When he gets home, he's seeing his dad's car being towed, and that's when Biff is standing there and he's going, "Oh, I crashed your car. I spilled beer on myself. What's wrong with the blind spot? You didn't tell me about the blind spot." Biff crashes George's car, so now there's no, and that's why he's mad. He's like, "Dad, I was going to borrow the car," and he's like, "I know, son, but I'm sorry." Yeah. Biff's my superior. He's doing that whole thing. At the end, when now, and then the whole beginning is that Lorraine is like, I don't like her. I don't like Jennifer. Well, what kind of girl calls a boy? And I don't like, at the end of the movie, she's like, oh, Jennifer called for you again. I really like her, Marty. Are you going to take her out to the lake? And he's like, well, the car's wrecked. And they're like, the car's wrecked. And they're freaking out.
Yeah, but when you're riding high and have a nice house and making good money, your outlook on life changes. Oh, she's a nice girl versus fuck that little bitch.
Right. But the 4x4 that he sees is in the garage. He sees it at the beginning of the movie. He's like, oh, look at that. Wouldn't that be awesome to have that car? And that's the car that he has at the end of the movie. That's his car. Right. That like his parents bought for him. And then that line
comes back and it's like the tables turn though. And it's like Biff is the asshole and he's buffing the car. And
in a fucking jumpsuit, just like putting on my second coat, Mr. McFly.
Yeah, and the very last thing I wrote that I liked as a high was, well, maybe we should be doing that because we already did the lows and highs, but whatever. Is one of the last lines in the movie where
Roads.
you know we have to go back to the future. Yeah, no, that line's good too. Where we're going, we don't need roads. But where he goes, I have to tell you about the future. It involves both of you. It involves your kids or whatever. And they look at each other like, I like that.
Yeah, it's about your kids.
Like, I guess we're going to have some kids together. Yeah. You know what I mean?
I mean, I can understand Marty getting in the car because he, you know, I like the line where he's just like, what happens? What do we just become assholes or something? But he knows the time machine. He knows all this shit. Like, Jennifer's coming into this totally clean. Like, who's this guy?
You know
and
what
what's
I'm
this
thinking
car?
of right now? Could I just say it's a little bit unrelated?
What?
I'm thinking of the whole scene in Knocked Up where it's Seth Rogen and fucking
Yeah.
Paul Rudd talking about
He's
like, who's Doc? What's a DeLorean? You know, like I'm gonna stick you my DeLorean and gun it to 88 miles an hour. Like
that'd be a deal breaker.
Yeah,
that'd be a deal breaker.
No, but it was a funny little scene too. It's like, you know, those guys or those characters at least. I mean, who knows how much Seth Rogen and Paul really like Back. They probably do. They seem like people who probably would appreciate Back to the Future. But
everyone
like,
appreciates. Back
you know
to
what I
the
mean? It's like those characters in that movie. They'd appreciate this podcast. You know?
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, that was Back to the Future, one of the greatest movies of all time, hands down. Yes. One of the best. Let's do the coin toss, and
what should we say? What our highs and high or low would be?
Well, we've got two different requests, but let's see what we get, and then we'll read it. All right.
Okay.
Tails.
Aww.
We had a good streak. We had the three.
Too often now, I find that the lows have things that I have more highs than lows because I'm just endeared to the.
Well, you're not gonna for this one. I'll tell you that right now. We're breaking a 3-streak high. That's our highest. The three highs in a row. All right. So Jen writes. So by the way, everyone, please write in to moviehighlow@gmail.com or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook at moviehighlow, all one word. And let us know if you have any recommendations for high or lows. We're going low for the next episode. Jen writes in. She says, when it comes to lows, romantic comedies tend to take the cake. And of all the romantic comedies I've ever seen, none are quite as awful as early 2000s J-Lo, Ben Affleck, utter piece of garbage, Geely.
It's turkey time.
Oh my God, it is turkey time. Gobble, gobble, gobble.
You gonna play your thing? With Shakira.
Nobody that went totally under. That should have went viral. If you go to Movie High-Low,
I think you're blaming on the alcohol Mad Men thing should have gone viral.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of things that should have gone viral. We should have gone viral. Maybe next week's episode will go viral.
You know what went viral? Coronavirus. That's what went viral.
I know. You're not kidding.
I should be laughing.
So next week we're going to be doing this is bizarre. Martin Brest's Geely. Martin Brest. First of all, his name's Brest. Second of all,
the director in a bra.
This fucking guy directed Scent of a Woman. The guy,
saggy breasts.
The guy that directed Scent of a Woman's breast sagged so bad that he made Geely. The same guy, and he quit making movies after that. By the way, so
he did Scent of a Woman.
Yeah.
Al Pacino.
Yeah. I'm in the dark here. I'm in the dark.
I'm in the dark here. You understand? I'm in the dark.
Went from that to it's turkey time. Oh boy. Well, it's going to be turkey time next week. Well, everybody, thank you.
The mic stand just bracing itself for that
yeah,
podcast.
ready for, oh God. That's
Speaking of sagging breast, the mic stand is being
And I think that movie's like 2 hours too.
I think some flowers are starting to die.
Fuck. Okay,
it's
well.
2 hours?
It's a long piece of shit. I've only watched, I remember watching it once back then when it came out, like to see what everyone was talking about, to be like, is it really this bad? And being like, wow, it's really is fucking bad. But now we'll get to revisit it again and see if
it's
it really...
supposed to be when like Ben Affleck and J-Lo were dating and like, well,
people
I think
were just sick
in
of
the
them.
beginning of the relationship or I don't know, something.
It was partly the tabloids. People were just kind of sick of them as a couple. But like, I remember the movie being very bad, not being a good film. But we'll see. I mean, it's been over... Almost.
It's Ben Affleck?
It's Ben Affleck. It's been almost.
We should talk about the movie we just watched them as the alcoholic. That's pretty good.
We should. Well, we'll talk more about Ben Affleck next week, especially like his...
Man, Ben Affleck is naked in my bed. Ooh, somebody must have been an extra special good poopykins.
All right, save some of it for next week.
Okay.
All right, so thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Movie High-Low podcast discussing...
Ben, you are so perfect. Sorry. I'm I'm getting excited for it now.
All right, good. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Movie High Low, a podcast discussing the best and worst cinema has to offer. We'll see you next week with Martin Brest-Gili.
His name is really Breasts.
Brest.
Is it Breasts?
Marty Boobs.
Is it Breasts? He must have gotten so much shit growing up.
Yeah,
That's why he became a director.
Yeah, you'd have to.
He's used to putting up with shit, overcoming adversity.
Marty Tits.
All right.
We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
If Grandpa hadn't hit him, then none of you would have been born.
Yeah, well, still don't understand what Dad was doing in the middle of the street.
What was it, George? Bird watching?
What, Lorraine? What?